Welcome to the Roberts Law Office Injury Podcast. Kentucky attorney Jeff Roberts has over 25 years of experience. He'll provide answers to your questions related to personal injury and automobile accidents, workers' compensation claims, and Social Security disability benefits. Let's join Jeff for this episode. Well, friends, we are back in Murray, Calloway County with attorney Jeff Roberts. Today, we're going to talk about motorcycles, motorcycle safety. We're going to talk about a few other issues, including some statistics that I hope you find interesting. Jeff, thanks for showing up. How you been?
I've been doing good, Jim. How about you?
I'm loving the weather. We're getting a little break here. I think we're getting closer and closer to springtime, which means obviously motorcycle season. And we do this every year. I think every year we try to kind of launch into spring with an episode that deals with motorcycle and motorcycle safety issues. As a personal injury attorney, obviously, you've dealt with a lot of these accidents, unfortunately. But at the same time, you're also an avid motorcyclist. You've been riding since you were very young. And so I think your perspective adds a lot of value for the listeners.
And that's true. We do these pretty much about every year in the springtime when people are starting to get their motorcycles back out and get back on the road. And the main reason for that is because I have been I've ridden motorcycles, street bikes pretty much even actually before I turned 16, I was riding street bikes from that. And so motorcycle riders and riding a motorcycle is something that I enjoy doing. And I want to kind of encourage people, the people who ride the motorcycles, to be safe when they get back out on the road. Also, and primarily the other drivers on the road to remember that motorcyclists are going to be out there again now, and they need to be paying attention.
Well, I'm glad you brought up both sides of that, because it is muscle memory, right? For a motorcyclist, I mean, just getting used to, okay, hey, it's been a little while since I've been on the bike. It's been sitting in the garage or out in the shed for the winter season. Now it's coming back out. You're a little rusty, maybe. But for the other drivers, just not being accustomed to seeing the bikes on the road, and with such a narrow profile like that, it's hey, we need to remember, it's that time of year now, and it's going to be with us for quite a while, and that's fine. But again, that sense of, hey, let's just all be aware of what's going on around us.
Exactly, and having ridden for years and represented a lot of people, unfortunately, in my career who've been injured from while riding a motorcycle from a collision that's occurred. And I think the statistics will bear this out, that the vast majority of motorcycle wrecks or collisions are caused by a motor vehicle driver or a car or a truck driver who just did not pay good attention when they pulled out from a road, when they made a left-hand turn, something of that nature. It's rare that the motorcyclist operator is the one who causes the collision. It does occur occasionally, but generally it is the other driver who's just not paying proper attention that's causing the collision to occur.
Well, and not only is the motorcyclist at a bigger risk for being in the collision, I guess, but also the risk for serious injuries. I mean, just really compounds, because, again, they're not as protected, obviously, as the driver of the car.
Exactly. The latest statistics that I've seen in that regard were from 2020, and in that year there was 5,579 motorcyclists who died because of a collision on the roadway in the United States, and that's a very high number of people who die from those. And the statistics indicate that a motorcyclist is 28 times more likely to die from a collision than someone that's in a car or other type of motor vehicle besides a motorcycle from that. So the dangers posed to a motorcyclist from a collision is substantially greater than it is to someone that's in a car.
Well, and that's, as parents listen to this episode, I mean, I would really encourage you, and Jeff and I have talked about this before, of sitting down and maybe having your young driver either listen to these episodes, or if nothing else, at least having the conversation with them. Because, again, younger drivers just have less time behind the wheel. They're less experienced, and they're not used to all of these issues that a more experienced older driver, has already dealt with and remembers and thinks about. And so hopefully there's an educational impact, from these podcasts as well. So Jeff, let's kind of talk about motorcycle safety. I mean, just getting the bike out of the garage and starting it up and hitting the road is not always the best thing to do, right? I mean, they're still checking on equipment and things like that, I would think.
Yes, when you first get your bike out, first thing you need to do before you ever get your bike on the road is make sure your insurance coverage on that bike is up to date. And we can talk a little further about the types of insurance coverage you should have a little later on in the episode or in other episodes as well from that standpoint. So check that before you ever even start getting your bike out there. But before you put your bike on the road and get out riding on the bike, you need to check the safety equipment on the bike to start with. Make sure the headlight is still working the way it is supposed to be working. Make sure all of your blinkers on your bike is still working. Check the tire pressure, check the tire tread, because if you don't want to be out on a motorcycle when you have very low tread on the back. If you live in western Kentucky or pretty much anywhere in Kentucky, you know that if you don't like the weather, just wait for 24 hours or 20 minutes and it will change. And I've had this when I've been riding and start off riding, and it's a beautiful, bright, sunny day, and before I know it, I've had a rain shower that's occurred, and now the roads are wet. And you try to make curves on a motorcycle, turns on a motorcycle, when you got slick tires and the roads are wet, it can be very dangerous for you from that standpoint. So make sure all of that equipment, make sure your brakes are in good working order. Just check all the safety equipment, make sure everything on the bike itself, and make sure everything is in proper working order before you ever get the bike out on the road. And then, as you kind of alluded to earlier, you're a little rusty. So when you first start off, don't try to do hairpin turns and things of that nature. Get your bearings back on the bike before you get up to speed and start riding like you did when you put the bike up at the end of the riding season last year.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. When you bring up the fact that you can get that quick shower that shows up often in the springtime, we get those, and it's not just the water. It seems like the surface has so much oil on it and grease on it sometimes that bubbles up as well. When it gets wet, and those roads just get extremely slick. So even on a straightaway, you can still hydroplane, you can still fishtail. There's a lot of things that can still happen, and it's just we're not thinking about that early enough in the season probably. So again, slowing down, increasing your distance in between the other drivers, all of those things they matter, because that may be the difference of you getting home safely.
Exactly, and now this time of the year, and I see this, I'm seeing more and more awareness of this as someone who's ridden for years. I've known about this problem some time ago, but it's becoming more and more at least well known or better known than it was, and that is now also people not only are getting their motorcycles out, they're getting their mowers out.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, there's still some people who, when they mow the yard by a roadway, they throw the grass clippings out into the road, and that can be very, very dangerous on a motorcycle. When you're riding a motorcycle, you come around a curve, or you're in it going through a curve, and all of a sudden you encounter grass clippings that's been thrown out into the roadway, and that can be very slick and can cause problems for the motorcyclist as well. So you've got to be careful of that. If you're the cyclist, the motorcyclist riding the bike, you got to be careful of that and keep an eye out for that at this point in time. But also, when you mow your yard, don't do that. It doesn't matter what kind of mower you've got, whether you push mower, whether you have a riding lawn mower. When you're mowing by the road, throw the grass clippings back up into the yard. Do not throw them out into the roadway, because that can be very dangerous for somebody riding a motorcycle.
Well, and that's the thing, for the person riding the motorcycle. If you're in a car, a lot of times it doesn't make a difference, and a lot of us don't even think about it. But little things like that can make a big difference for a motorcyclist, or maybe a motorcyclist and a passenger. And it's just, these are little simple safety tips that everybody can think about and hopefully put into practice that may make, a serious difference for that motorcyclist.
Exactly, it can. It can be. It can be result in a very serious injury for a motorcyclist from that standpoint. Not only are motorcyclists more likely to be injured in a collision, I think I said earlier, 28 times more likely to suffer or to die from a collision. They're 4 times more likely to have an injury from a collision than somebody in a car from that standpoint. And at least from my 30-year career, the injuries that you receive are going to be substantially greater than what somebody is in the car for traveling at the same speed anyway. 30-mile crash in a car is going to cause certain injuries to a person. 30-mile crash when you're on a motorcycle and now you're going flying through there, landing on the pavement, that's going to cause substantially greater injuries for the motorcyclist.
No, that makes sense. And unfortunately, some of them often lead to fatalities, and that's a whole other topic. We've talked about traffic fatalities in the past. Jeff, as far as we've talked a little bit about motorcycle safety, getting the bike prepped, and getting ready to go, the insurance issues. Let's come back to that real quick if you don't mind. Insurance is handled a little differently in the state of Kentucky for a motorcycle than it is for a car. I'm specifically talking about the personal injury protection, or PIP, or no fault. Do you want to talk about that for just a little bit?
Sure. Kentucky, people refer to Kentucky as a no-fault state, and it is to a very limited extent from that standpoint. But Kentucky is a mandatory insurance state, and which means basically when you purchase insurance for any type of motor vehicle, there are certain coverages you have to have. First off, you have to have insurance coverage, and then when you purchase it, you've got certain coverages that are always going to be included in that for most motor vehicles. Motorcycle is the one exception to part of that. So when you purchase it, you got liability coverage. So if you're at fault, it will pay the bodily injury for somebody else. Property damage, same again. If you're at fault, it'll pay the property damage for someone else.
Up to the certain limits of the policy.
Up to the policy limits from that standpoint. Another mandatory coverage for motor vehicles is what is referred to as personal injury protection, PIP benefits, or basic reparations benefits. A lot of different names that are used for that coverage.
This is the no-fault coverage.
And that is the only part that's no fault. And that no fault coverage basically says that the vehicle you're in or on is responsible for the first $10,000 of your medical bills and or your lost wage benefits. That is mandatory coverage for cars, trucks, and most every vehicle on the roadway besides a motorcycle. Motorcycle, the personal injury protection coverage is optional coverage. So you have to actually say, I want that coverage from there. And there's a lot of motorcycle policies that are written that do not have that coverage on the policy, and you need to have that coverage on there because, we've had this conversation before, but most people do not have any sort of short-term disability benefits. And if you're in a motorcycle wreck, probably the likelihood is you're going to be out of work for a period of time recuperating from that. And if you don't have short-term disability benefits, you're not going to have any income coming in. If you got the personal injury protection, at least you have some money coming in from that standpoint. And if you've got co-pays and deductibles on your health insurance, then you can use the PIP benefits to pay the co-pays and the deductibles from that standpoint. And even if you're not the one at fault, if the other driver is at fault in causing the accident and you do not have that personal injury protection coverage, by Kentucky law, you cannot recover the first $10,000 of your medical bills. So that's $10,000 you're not able to recover from the at-fault party. It's a penalty for not purchasing that coverage is essentially what it is. And it's if on a motorcycle, if you have the insurance but you don't have the PIP benefits, you lose that $10,000. If you're driving a car on the roadway and it's not covered at all, you lose that $10,000 of the first $10,000 of medical bills ends up being your responsibility if you don't have health insurance. And even if you do have health insurance, then a chunk of that's going to be your responsibility.
Right. Well, there's a difference between driving and driving legally, I guess. Is one way to look at it.
Correct.
As far as having the appropriate coverage.
Yeah.
Jeff, what is it about the PIP coverage that causes a lot of motorcyclists to either opt out of it or not select it or just flat out turn it down?
I think the biggest part of that, to some extent, is the money, the cost of that coverage from that standpoint. But a lot of times, I just don't think the people think about it, and the agent doesn't bring it up. When I insured my motorcycle, when I first went to insure it after I'd started practicing law and understood this, because until I became a lawyer and started doing this, I didn't know the ins and outs of insurance either.
Most people wouldn't.
Exactly. So when I went and I talked to the agent about coverage, and he, we were looking it over, and I noticed it wasn't on there. on the what he was talking about, and I said, "What about PIP coverage?" And he's, "Well, that's and he said, "Well, do you want that?" I said, "Most people don't." He didn't even the agent I was dealing with didn't even offer it,
Wow.
or didn't even mention it to me to start with. So if I hadn't looked and asked about it, and I would not have got it, and probably wouldn't have if I hadn't been paying attention. I would have thought I probably had it because every other insurance coverage it's automatic,
Yeah.
and on this one it's not automatic for motorcycles. So I did look and pay attention. It's one of the things from law school you learn is read the small print, and so I did that, and I mentioned it, and he said, "Oh yeah, we can write it for that. It just I don't normally do that." And so then he quoted me. He added it in, and we were able to do that, and that's part of it. And I think at least at one time, I don't know if it's still this way. Some carriers just didn't want to write it because they know that if there's a wreck, they're going to be out that money,
Right.
and they can't avoid it with a car. They can potentially avoid it with a motorcycle, or they'll write passenger PIP or pedestrian PIP, which means if you're riding a motorcycle, you got a passenger. The passenger's covered.
That's
for
exactly
PIP
what I was going
coverage.
to ask you about.
For PIP coverage, but the rider themselves is not covered. Or if it's pedestrian PIP, if you hit somebody that's walking on the roadway, then that pedestrian is covered, but you're not covered still from that setting. And if you look at it and you don't investigate it, you may think you've got PIP coverage. You've got to find out for sure that you're getting good PIP coverage. So if it's got P, like a P in front of it or something, that P basic reparations benefits or something, you need to ask, because it could just be passenger or pedestrian, and you don't actually have coverage for yourself. And most riders, some people ride with a passenger frequently, but a lot of riders
Solo riders.
ride solo,
Yeah.
and 30-year career, I don't know that I've ever represented a pedestrian. I can't remember ever representing a pedestrian that got struck by a motorcycle.
But they're hard to hit. I mean, they're hard to hit, man. Come on.
That is true, and with a motorcycle you can dodge a little bit easier. But I'm sure it occurs.
Yeah.
But most motorcyclists are going to go their entire lifetime and never hit a pedestrian. So you're more likely to injure yourself and you have an injury yourself as a motorcycle rider than you are to strike a pedestrian. So you need to have the coverage that's going to protect you, and that's still going to protect the pedestrian too if that situation happens. You're not taking away that coverage, but. And when we talked about the no-fault part, the no-fault aspect of PIP is that the vehicle you're in or on provides that coverage, and then eventually that insurance company would get the money back from the at-fault driver's insurance company. But while you're getting the treatment, it pays for the medical bills. And they're the ones who have to wait to get the money back from
you. Don't have to establish negligence for that coverage to kick in for those benefits. No. So again, it's no fault. You don't have to worry about who caused it.
Exactly. And even if you are the at-fault party, your insurance still will pay that $10,000 in PIP for yours. You just don't have a coverage for the your pain and suffering, etc.
Well, and that's the thing when you're looking at motorcycle coverage, and again, as you explained, a lot of people opt out just because of the extra cost, but is that annual premium going to be up to or exceeding $10,000? No, probably not. So the math actually works in your favor. And if, heaven forbid, you're actually involved in a wreck or some type of collision, and you've got time off of work, you've got hospital bills, that few extra $100 you may have put out is going to be well worth it.
Correct. Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be well worth it and come back to you. You'll be glad that you had it if you're involved in a wreck. I've represented a lot of people in my career who did not have that coverage on their motorcycle when they had a wreck, and none of them were happy that they did not have it, didn't realize they didn't have it.
Were never told, probably.
Yeah, never told, didn't realize it, didn't realize the consequences of not having it. I've never had someone who's had it that was a motorcycle rider who wasn't glad that they had it. When I explained, especially when I explained to them the benefit of having that, and a lot of them, some of them did know and knew what they had and purchased it intentionally. Others, they had no they really didn't understand it. They just had that coverage. And when I explained, yeah, you've got a good agent, they gave you this coverage. And a lot of times you don't have that. And I explained to them why, and they were very glad that they had that.
Well, and just to clarify, that doesn't mean the rest of the policy is not going to kick in, but we're really talking about that first $10,000.
Absolutely. That's all we're talking about. It's optional for a motorcycle, so you have to purchase that coverage from that standpoint.
That makes a lot of sense. But again, the math generally ought to work in your favor. I mean, it's probably going to be a few extra $100 here and there, on your premium for that year, but it's certainly worth the $10,000 in benefits that are going to be there for you.
Exactly. Yeah. And, it's going to depend to some extent on, your premiums are going to be based in part on what your rider safety is.
Yeah.
So, the safer you are as a rider and the more years you go without having a wreck, the less all of this coverage is going to cost for you. If you're 18, 19, 20 years, your premiums are going to be higher.
Right.
If you're,
as they are with everything.
Yeah. If you're my age and have a good safe driving record, your premiums aren't, even adding the PIP, the premiums are going to be not going to go up drastically with that coverage at that point in time.
Well, terrific. So that's a lot about the safety, and that's a lot about the insurance. Both of them are really important as we begin to talk about motorcycles. Spring's here. It's time to get out. Everybody loves riding, especially down here with LBL and all the other areas where you can get out and go. You can see some great county roads. You can see some great foliage, which is always nice when everything starts budding out again. You go see the lakes, go see the sunset. That's a great time. But again, there are some things you ought to do ahead of time just to prepare yourself.
Absolutely. West Kentucky and all of Kentucky is. It just has some beautiful scenery, wonderful places to ride, great roads to ride on, and some bad potholes you got to avoid. But Kentucky is very blessed in the scenery that we have, especially here in Western Kentucky. As you mentioned, land between the lakes is a wonderful place to go ride. I've always enjoyed riding up there along the Trace and the other roads in LBL from that standpoint. And even, in West Kentucky, we got a lot of beautiful places close by that we can ride to and have a very enjoyable day of riding and still be back home at night if you want to do that, as opposed to going on a multiple trip ride. Another aspect of safety that I do want to mention is motorcycle helmets. Kentucky is a state that you can ride a motorcycle without a helmet from that standpoint, but the statistics will bear this out. In my experience in 30 years of being a personal injury attorney and a motorcycle accident attorney, is that if you have a helmet, the chances of a significant brain injury or head injury goes down considerably. So having a motorcycle helmet or wearing a motorcycle helmet when you ride your motorcycle is very important from a safe standpoint. I know some people say they don't like motorcycle helmets. They think they restrict their field of vision, things of that nature. And I understand, people who have that viewpoint, but it is so much safer to ride with a DOT approved helmet, and you need to make sure you're getting a properly approved helmet from that standpoint that meets the standards for the National Highway Traffic Safety and the DOT. And there's other private companies that have standards that actually are greater than what the government requires, and getting those types of helmets can be very, very can reduce the significance and the severity of injuries that someone has. And now Kentucky does require certain individuals to have helmets when they ride a motorcycle.
Is that age related? Is that primarily age related?
Partly age related. If you're under 21 years of age, you are required to have a helmet if you're on a motorcycle. It's got age related and experience related, essentially. If you're under 21 years of age, you have to wear a helmet. If you only have a motorcycle operator's permit, you are required to have a helmet. And if you've only had your operator's license for motorcycle license for less than a year, you are required to wear a helmet in Kentucky.
In all the years that we've done these podcasts, talking about motorcycling, talking about traffic accidents, all the times that we've talked about collisions, I never knew that about the regulations on helmets being experience-based as well. I always assumed age-wise, but I never realized there were experience-based regulations.
Yeah, experience-based regulations as well. When Kentucky, for a lot of years was a mandatory helmet state. And don't ask me when they switched over. I think it was early 2000s, but I'm not positive in that regard. But when it first switched over to helmets being optional, there was actually a requirement of health insurance. You had to have health insurance, or you couldn't ride a motorcycle without a helmet. You had to have a helmet. That requirement has been removed since then. I don't know when it got removed, but it's not part of the law now. But the age requirement and the experience requirements have stayed, and they should. I mean, if you're a new rider to riding motorcycles, and now a lot of people. That kind of goes, the way the law is, it's having your motorcycle operator's license for less than a year, you've got to wear a helmet. Now, some people, their first foray on a motorcycle is a street bike. That's what they start off learning and riding on. There's a lot of people in Western Kentucky, a lot of kids in Western Kentucky who've ridden dirt bikes for years and years before they ever turn 16 years of age. And those, I mean, there's some of them who probably can ride a bike better than I can because of what they've done on dirt bikes and everything over the years. So if they get on a bike, they may be experienced on riding the motorcycle even when they get on, but they still, doesn't matter if they've ridden a dirt bike for 20 years and you're 30 years old. Once you get your motorcycle operator's permit to ride a street bike, you still have to.
That's the date.
That's the date that starts that 1 year, and then 1 year after that, then you can go without a helmet. But you shouldn't. You still should be wearing that helmet. And frankly, I see all kinds of different helmets out there, and DOT approves different types of helmets, but a full face helmet is by far the safest alternative that you can have if you're riding a motorcycle.
And that's one of those things when it comes to brain trauma, when it comes to head injuries, resulting from these type of motorcycle accidents. Yeah, I'm allowed to, and I'm permitted not to wear a helmet, but doesn't mean I should. Doesn't mean I shouldn't, right? I mean, I don't want to say common sense because that's offensive to some people who choose not to wear them. And like you said, field of vision, other concerns. But the law of averages, you're probably going to be better off if you do put on that properly approved, properly endorsed helmet. I wouldn't imagine getting on a bike without one, but then again, I don't ride as often as you do, but I think it's a question of safety for me.
It is clearly a question of safety, and I understand the mindset behind that. Frankly, there was at times in my life that when helmets were mandatory and I was riding the bike, I would say, if I ever was riding in a state that didn't mandate a helmet, I'd take my helmet off. And if you go from point A to point B and don't have a wreck, wearing a helmet, not wearing a helmet, you still have to have eye protection, but wearing a helmet or not wearing a helmet isn't that big a deal. Problem is you don't know when you're going to have that wreck because the wreck is not in all likelihood, the wreck is not going to be because of your error in riding the motorcycle. The wreck's going to be because somebody that's on the road with you didn't pay attention, but you're going to be the one that's going to pay the price. Or unfortunately, if you pass away because you're not wearing a helmet and you hit your head on the pavement, then your family's going to be the one paying the price for that choice.
Well, Jeff, and I'm glad you started off the episode kind of talking about really a lot of these accidents, a lot of these collisions are really not always the fault of the motorcyclist. It's more the car driver who maybe you were in the blind spot, they didn't see you, or maybe they were just inattentive, or maybe distracted, right? And so it's not how good of a motorcyclist you are; it's the people around you. And just because you can doesn't mean you should. and that's that's just worse to live by. In some cases, that's absolutely true. In this case,
It's absolutely true on riding a motorcycle. At least in my opinion, if you're going to ride a motorcycle, you absolutely have to ride defensively.
yeah,
It's just if you don't ride defensively, you will. I don't say anything is an absolute, so I won't say you will be in a wreck. You are very likely to be in a wreck if you don't ride defensively, and it's not going to be because of something you did. In all likelihood, it's going to be because of something somebody else did. But if you ride defensively, you're coming up and you see a car at a stop. You've got right away. They got a stop sign, and to let off the gas a little bit to make sure they're not going to pull out in front of you. That can help you stop or avoid a collision if they do end up pulling out in front of you. If you keep on going at highway speed and they pull out in front of you, you may not be able to make that stop. You've got to ride defensively if you're riding a motorcycle.
Good way to wrap up the summary. Wrap up the episode. Jeff, any final words here as we wrap up? But I think that's just great advice. Again, driving defensively doesn't mean you can't enjoy that sunset. Doesn't mean you can't enjoy the scenery around you. You just got to have that little extra layer of just awareness. And again, this is about your personal safety, so it's worth being a little bit more focused on that than not. I guess.
Exactly, and that's it. And just get out there, enjoy the roadways, enjoy the scenery. And feel the breeze on your body, but don't just be careful when you're out there doing it so you get home safely to your family.
Outstanding. Hey, Jeff, if somebody is unfortunately involved in a collision this season and they need to get a hold of somebody who is not only a personal injury attorney, but actually rides and understands what it's like and understands the situation from personal experience, how do they contact you?
You can contact me a multitude of ways. The best way to contact me is to call my office. If you call during business hours, there will be some, unless everybody's on another line, a human being will answer the phone. From that standpoint, the office number is 270-753-0053. If you're out of the 270 area code and you want to call toll free, it's 1-800-844-5108. You can also reach out to me by email at jeff@jeffrobertslaw.com. My website at jeffrobertslaw.com also has a contact form on there that you can use to contact me. So a variety of ways that you can contact me.
Outstanding. Hey, Jeff, thanks for your time. And listeners, we will be back in a couple of weeks. But as far as this goes, do me a favor. If you have friends or family members who are motorcyclists, please consider sharing this particular episode on your social media so other people can listen to it and find out more about it. But again, thanks for your time, and we'll be back in a couple of weeks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you for listening to the Roberts Law Office Injury Podcast. Jeff will return in 2 weeks. Until then, he invites you to visit jeffrobertslaw.com and follow his firm on Facebook. At the Roberts Law Office, you'll find a history of small town service and big city results.